Hey Reddit, need some advice and maybe just a place to vent. I'm Calder Matthews. I'm 42, married to Maris, 38, and we have a daughter, Sloane, 16. On paper, my life looks pretty perfect. I run a successful business, we live in a nice home, and our daughter goes to one of the best private schools in the area. But the truth is, my home doesn't feel like mine anymore. We're preparing for Maris's side of the family reunion this weekend. Big event, everyone shows up dressed to impress, and for some reason, Maris seems unusually invested this year. She's been obsessing over her outfit, specifically a red dress. I was in my home office yesterday, finishing up some emails, when I heard Maris and Sloane talking in the living room. They didn't know I was nearby. Sloane, Mom, you're really wearing that dress? Isn't it a little much? You're going to make Uncle Alden pass out. Maris, laughing, oh stop it. It's just a dress. Besides, Alden appreciates it when people make an effort. Sloane, yeah people. Not his sister-in-law. Seriously Mom, you're acting like a teenager with a crush. Maris, in a dismissive tone, don't be ridiculous. Your father won't even notice what I'm wearing. He'll probably have his face buried in his phone all evening, answering emails. Sloane, true. He's clueless. You've got nothing to worry about. They both laughed. I stood there frozen. My own daughter and wife openly agreeing on how oblivious and unimportant I am in this dynamic. And Alden Crawford, Maris's cousin by marriage technically, but someone who's been the golden boy of her family for as long as I've known them. Tall, charming, divorced recently. He's the kind of guy people naturally gravitate toward. This isn't the first time I've noticed Maris getting overly friendly with Alden at these gatherings. The lingering glances, the inside jokes, the way she laughs a little too hard at his stories. But this time, it feels different. Like she's stopped caring whether I notice or not. Sloane, on the other hand, has started acting like I'm some relic gathering dust in the corner of our house. She rolls her eyes when I ask her to do basic things, like turning off her bedroom light before leaving for school. Every attempt I make at conversation is met with one-word answers or heavy sighs. And Maris? She doesn't step in. After overhearing that conversation, I tried to bring it up later that night. Maris was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. I casually asked about the dress. So, the red dress, huh? Big plans to impress Alden. She froze for a split second, then recovered with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Maris, oh don't be silly Calder. It's just a dress. It feels like there's something going on here. I can't shake the feeling that you're enjoying his attention a little too much. She sighed, set down her glass, and gave me that patronizing look. Maris, Calder, you're imagining things. Alden is family. Stop being so insecure, it's honestly embarrassing. That word. Embarrassing. It cut deep. I wanted to push further, to demand honesty, but I just stood there, feeling like a child being scolded. She walked out of the kitchen, leaving me with nothing but the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. I've spent years providing for this family, trying to make sure Maris and Sloane have everything they could possibly need. But lately, I feel like a ghost in my own home. They talk around me, not to me. Decisions are made without me. And now, I'm supposed to sit through this family reunion, watching Maris parade around in her red dress while Alden smirks in the background. I'm starting to question everything. Am I overreacting? Is this all in my head? Or is there something going on here that I can't quite put my finger on? Honestly, I don't know how much more of this I can take. The reunion's tomorrow, and the weight of everything is pressing down on me. I tried to shake off yesterday's conversation, but it's stuck in my chest like a stone. Maris has been flitting around the house all morning, making lists, checking decorations, and humming to herself. She looks excited. Not the usual stressed about hosting family kind of energy. No, this feels different. Like she's anticipating something. Sloane's been in her room with her door closed, probably scrolling through TikTok or messaging her friends. She barely acknowledged me this morning when I asked if she wanted to grab breakfast together. Just a flat, no, I'm busy. Maris eventually called me into our bedroom to help her zip up the dress. The dress. The red one. I walked in, and there she was, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the fabric over her hips. It clung to her, flawless and bold. She turned her head and gave me a small smile through the mirror. Maris, can you help me with the zipper? I can't reach it. I walked over, and my hands felt clumsy as I tugged the zipper up. Her perfume hit me, something floral and expensive. It's the same one she wore on our anniversary 2 years ago. Funny how I remember that, but she probably doesn't. As I zipped her up, she glanced at me over her shoulder. Maris, what do you think? Too much? Me, it's definitely a statement. She laughed lightly, but I caught the flicker of irritation in her expression. Maris, you're impossible, Calder. It's just a dress. I swear, you're acting like I'm walking into a romantic dinner with Alden instead of a family reunion. Me, are you? The question came out before I could stop it. Her eyes locked onto mine in the mirror, and for a moment, I thought she'd crack. But then, she rolled her eyes and turned away, reaching for her earrings. Maris, honestly, Calder, you're exhausting sometimes. And just like that, the moment was gone. I left the room feeling humiliated, like I'd just been dismissed from a conversation I wasn't even allowed to have. I went into my office, shut the door, and just sat there. I stared at the family photo on my desk, one from 5 years ago. We were on vacation in Hawaii, and Maris had her arms wrapped around my neck while Sloane sat between us, grinning at the camera. We looked happy. Like a family. I don't know when things shifted. When Maris started seeing me as someone to tolerate instead of someone to love. When Sloane started talking to me like I was some clueless old man instead of her father. Later in the afternoon, Sloane came into my office without knocking, phone in hand, a bored expression on her face. Sloane, Mom wants you to go pick up the extra wine bottles for tomorrow. She said you know the kind. Me, can you at least knock before barging in here, Sloane? This is still my space. She sighed, like I'd asked her to do something monumentally difficult. Sloane, whatever, sorry. Are you going or not? I grabbed my keys and walked past her, not bothering to respond. At the store, I stood in the wine aisle staring blankly at the shelves. The bright labels blurred together. The entire time, I kept replaying Maris's laugh from this morning, Sloane's condescending tone, and Alden's smug face in my head. By the time I got back home, Maris and Sloane were in the living room. Maris had a glass of wine already poured, and Sloane was lounging on the couch, phone in hand. Neither of them acknowledged me when I walked in. I set the wine bottles on the counter, and Maris glanced over her shoulder. Maris, oh good you got them. Thanks, honey. Her voice was light, casual, like I was just an errand boy who'd completed a task. I didn't respond. I just walked upstairs to our bedroom and closed the door. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. And I can't shake the feeling that something's about to happen, something that's going to change everything, the day of the reunion. The house is buzzing with activity, catering staff setting up tables, floral arrangements arriving, Maris floating around in that dress. I caught Sloane sneaking a glass of wine from the kitchen. When I called her out, she just smirked. Sloane, relax, Dad. It's just one sip. Don't be such a buzzkill. Before I could respond, Maris swept in, laughing lightly. Maris, oh Calder, let her have a little fun. It's a special day. I stood there, wine bottle in hand, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Alden showed up early. Perfectly pressed shirt, effortless charm. He hugged Maris a little too long, whispered something in her ear that made her laugh, and then turned to me with that damn smile. Alden, Calder, good to see you, man. You look comfortable. He said it like I'd just rolled out of bed. I forced a smile, shook his hand, and stepped aside. Maris immediately pulled him into the living room, and Sloane joined them like a loyal sidekick. I stayed in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink I didn't really want. From across the room, I caught Alden staring at Maris as she adjusted her dress strap. I can't keep doing this, guests started arriving, filling the house with chatter and laughter. Maris was the perfect hostess, smiling, laughing, her hand lightly touching Alden's arm every time he said something oh so charming. I tried to mingle, but every conversation felt hollow. Sloane floated between groups, ignoring me completely. At one point, I saw her showing Alden something on her phone, both of them laughing like old friends. I stayed by the bar, nursing my drink, watching Maris and Alden. The way she leaned in when he spoke, how he rested his hand on the small of her back as they walked past me, it wasn't subtle. At dinner, I ended up seated across from them. Alden made a joke, something about Calder always working, even at the dinner table. Everyone laughed. Maris smiled at him, not at me. I felt invisible. Like I was just there to fill a seat. Midway through the meal, Alden leaned over and whispered something in Maris's ear. She laughed, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. And that's when it hit me. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore after dinner. People scattered, some to the patio, others to the living room. I stayed back, clearing plates like some kind of waiter. Maris disappeared with Alden onto the back deck. Through the glass doors, I could see them standing close, their heads tilted toward each other, voices low. Sloane walked past me with a plate of dessert, not even glancing my way. Me, where's your mom? Sloane, shrugging, outside with Alden. Where else? That casual dismissal stung. I watched through the glass as Alden leaned in, his hand brushing Maris's arm. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laughed softly, her face glowing under the string lights. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside. Me, Maris, Alden. They both turned to me, Maris's smile faltering slightly. Maris, Calder, we were just. Me, no. Don't. Not here. Not in our home. Alden straightened up, his usual smirk replaced by something colder. Alden, take it easy, Calder. We're just talking. Me, talking? Right. Because that's what this looks like. Maris, softly, you're making a scene. I glanced back through the glass doors. A few guests were watching, their conversations paused. Sloane stood in the corner, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I turned back to Maris and Alden, my chest tight with something between rage and heartbreak. Me, enjoy your conversation. I walked back inside, past the guests, past Sloane, and straight into my office. I closed the door, locked it, and sank into my chair. Outside, the party continued without me. I stayed in my office for what felt like hours. The muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses bled through the door. I stared at the family photo on my desk again, the one where we were happy, or at least pretending to be. At some point, Sloane knocked on the door. Sloane, Dad? Are you seriously hiding in here right now? Me, I'm not hiding, Sloane. I just needed a minute. Sloane, sighing, well, Mom wants you to come back out. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. Right. Me, tell your mom I'll be out soon. She didn't respond. Just walked away, her footsteps fading down the hall. I finally forced myself to leave the office. The house was quieter now, some guests had already left. Maris was in the kitchen with Alden, leaning against the counter, wine glass in hand. They were too close, again. When she saw me, she straightened up, plastering on a smile. Maris, oh, there you are. I was starting to think you'd disappeared entirely. Alden smirked into his wine glass. I wanted to smash it out of his hand. Me, I'm here. Don't worry. Maris, well, it's winding down now. Most people are leaving. You should say goodbye. She spoke to me like I was some background employee at her event. Alden didn't even bother looking at me, just kept sipping his wine. I didn't reply. I walked out onto the patio, breathing in the cool night air. A few lingering guests gave me polite nods before heading out the gate. When I turned back toward the house, I saw Maris and Alden again, this time through the kitchen window. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his chest. I felt something crack deep inside me. It wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't innocent. And I wasn't imagining things. The last guest had finally left. The house was quiet, except for the faint sound of Sloane's music playing upstairs. I was sitting on the couch, nursing what was probably my 5th drink of the night. Maris walked in, barefoot now, carrying her heels in one hand and a half-empty glass of wine in the other. Maris, well, that went well, don't you think? Me, did it? She froze for a second, then sighed, setting her heels down by the door. Maris, oh, Calder. Don't start. Me, no, let's talk. You've been glued to Alden all night. Sloane noticed. The guests noticed. Hell, even I noticed, and I'm supposed to be the clueless one, right? Her face tightened. Maris, you're blowing this out of proportion. Me, am I? Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look that way. She rolled her eyes, again with the eye roll. Maris, you're being paranoid. Alden and I were just talking, Calder. It's nothing. Me, then why did it feel like I was the only one in this house who wasn't in on the joke? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the counter, her back to me, and took a long sip of wine. Maris, I'm tired, Calder. I don't want to do this right now. Me, of course you don't. Because talking about it would mean admitting something's wrong. She didn't turn back around. She just set down her glass and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, staring at the spot where she'd been. Upstairs, a door closed softly, probably Sloane's. I looked around our empty, spotless kitchen, the remnants of a perfect evening scattered across countertops and tables. And for the first time in my own home, I felt like I didn't belong there at all. I sat there for a while after Maris walked out, staring at the faint outline of lipstick on her abandoned wine glass. The house felt hollow, like all the laughter and warmth from earlier had been drained out, leaving just silence. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I went upstairs, past Sloane's closed door, and into our bedroom. Maris was already in bed, her back turned to me. The red dress was draped over the armchair in the corner, like some bold flag planted in enemy territory. I stood there for a moment, staring at her silhouette in the dim light from the bathroom. Me, are you awake? She didn't answer. Her breathing was too steady to be real sleep, but I let it go. I changed into a t-shirt and shorts and climbed into bed, keeping a full foot of space between us. Neither of us said a word. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Maris's side was cold, and I could hear faint clattering downstairs. I threw on a hoodie and made my way to the kitchen, where Maris was at the counter, slicing fruit into a bowl. Sloane sat at the kitchen island, scrolling on her phone. Me, morning. Maris glanced up briefly, then returned to her task. Sloane didn't even look up. Maris, morning. I thought I'd make something light after last night's feast. Her voice was cheerful, overly so, like nothing had happened. Me, where's Alden this morning? Did he happen to leave a glass slipper behind? The knife paused mid-slice, and Sloane finally looked up, her brows furrowed. Sloane, Dad, seriously? What's your problem? Maris sighed, setting the knife down and turning to face me, arms crossed. Maris, Calder, I'm not doing this with you. Not in front of Sloane. Me, fine. We'll talk about it later. Or not. I'm sure Alden will keep you entertained in the meantime. Maris, stop it. Her voice was sharp this time, cutting through the fake morning calm. Sloane grabbed her phone and stormed out of the kitchen. Sloane, you guys are so embarrassing. Maris turned back to me, her eyes flashing with anger. Maris, do you even hear yourself? You sound pathetic, Calder. Me, pathetic? You've spent weeks fawning over Alden like some lovesick teenager, and I'm the pathetic one. Maris, oh, grow up. Alden is family. He's been through a lot lately, and I've been supporting him. That's all this is. Me, supporting him? That's what we're calling it now. She grabbed the bowl of fruit and slammed it onto the counter. Pieces of melon and strawberries bounced out onto the marble. Maris, you're being paranoid. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to deal with your constant suspicion? Maybe if you paid a little more attention to me instead of hiding in your office all day, you'd understand that there's nothing going on. Me, don't turn this around on me, Maris. I'm not the one wearing dresses for someone else's attention. Her face turned pale, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker across her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But she recovered quickly. Maris, you're impossible. She grabbed her coffee mug and walked out, leaving the mess of fruit and tension behind her. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. Sloane was right. We were embarrassing. And no matter how much I wanted to drag the truth out of Maris, it was clear she wasn't going to give it to me willingly. I spent the rest of the day avoiding both of them. I went into my office, closed the door, and buried myself in meaningless tasks just to keep my mind occupied. In the afternoon, I overheard Maris on the phone. Her voice was low, hushed, but I caught fragments. Maris, no, he's just being difficult again. Yeah, I know. I'll talk to him. Okay. Bye, Alden. She said his name softly, like it was something fragile, something worth protecting. That night when I climbed into bed, Maris was already asleep, at least, she pretended to be. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't keep doing this. The tension, the avoidance, the gut-wrenching feeling of being unwanted in my own home, it was eating me alive. Something had to give. And soon the next morning felt like walking through fog. Maris and Sloane were in the kitchen again, talking in hushed voices. The moment I stepped in, they both fell silent. Sloane grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. "I'm staying at Olivia's tonight. Don't wait up." She didn't even look at me as she said it. "Maris, I have an appointment later, so I might be home late too." "Me, an appointment?" Maris, not meeting my eyes, "Yes. A meeting. It's nothing." "Me, with Alden." She froze mid-sip of her coffee. "Maris, Calder, stop. Please." "Me, I just want an honest answer, Maris. Can you give me that? Or are we past that point now?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She set her mug down carefully, like she was trying not to shatter it. "Maris, I'm not doing this with you right now." She walked past me, grabbing her keys and purse. I didn't stop her. Once the door clicked shut behind her, I slumped into one of the kitchen chairs. My head was pounding, my chest tight. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into something dark and endless. I couldn't keep letting this go. I had to know. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed Maris's iPad from the kitchen counter. It was still logged into her accounts. My hands shook as I opened her messages. There he was. Alden Crawford. Their conversation thread wasn't long, but it was damning. "Alden, yesterday was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you. Maris, we need to be careful. He's starting to notice. Alden, let him. He's always been clueless. You deserve to be happy, Maris." I felt like I was going to throw up. My hands gripped the iPad so tightly I thought I might crack it. The worst part wasn't the words, it was how easy it all seemed. Like betraying me was just another box on their to-do list. I couldn't stay in that house. Not right then. I grabbed my coat and keys, and before I knew it, I was driving aimlessly through the city. My mind kept replaying their messages over and over. "You deserve to be happy, Maris. What about me? Did I not deserve that? Did Sloane not deserve parents who respected each other?" I ended up in a park, staring blankly at a pond while kids played in the distance. For the first time in years, I let myself feel it all: the anger, the heartbreak, the humiliation. By the time I got home, it was dark. The house was silent. Sloane's room was empty, and Maris hadn't come home yet. I sat on the couch, staring at the front door, waiting. At 11:42 p.m., Maris walked in. Her makeup was smudged, her hair messy, and her coat hung loosely around her shoulders. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Maris, you're still up." "Me, yeah. Couldn't sleep." She set down her purse, her movements slow and deliberate. "Maris, Calder, Me, don't. Don't lie to me, Maris." I saw the messages. Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like she might crumble. But then, she straightened up, crossing her arms over her chest. "Maris, you went through my iPad?" "Me, that's what you're focusing on? That is the problem here." She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us like a canyon, too wide to cross. "Me, just tell me one thing, Maris. Do you love him?" Her lip trembled, and she looked away. That was all the answer I needed. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "Me, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to end this. I'm done being the fool in this story." I stood up and walked past her, her perfume still clinging to the air between us. Behind me, I heard her let out a shaky breath, but I didn't look back. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my life again. But it didn't make the pain hurt any less. I didn't sleep. The guest room felt foreign, the sheets stiff and cold. I stared at the ceiling, every word from their messages looping in my head like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. "You deserve to be happy, Maris." Around 5 a.m., I gave up on trying to sleep and went downstairs. The house was quiet, still heavy with the aftermath of last night. Maris hadn't come looking for me. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee going cold in front of me. My phone buzzed. It was Sloane. "Sloane, staying at Olivia's for breakfast. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time. Even my daughter was avoiding me now. At around 7, Maris came down. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and she was wearing an old sweatshirt. She looked tired, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. "Maris, you're up early." "Me, couldn't sleep." "You, Maris, hesitating, not really. We sat there in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Me, so what now, Maris? Are we going to pretend this didn't happen? Are we just going to go back to our routines like everything's fine? She sighed, her hands clutching her coffee mug like it was the only thing holding her together. Maris, I never meant for it to get this far, Calder. Me, but it did. She flinched at my words. Maris, I was lonely. You've been so distant, always locked away in your office or buried in work. I felt invisible, Calder. Me, invisible? Maris, I've been here. Every day. Working to give you and Sloane everything you could ever need. And you're telling me I made you feel invisible. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Maris, I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying I was weak. I let things happen that shouldn't have happened. Me, weak. That's your excuse. I shook my head, pushing my chair back as I stood up. Me, you know, Maris, I would have done anything for you. For us. But you didn't give me a chance. You didn't talk to me. Instead, you turned to him. She started crying then, silent tears running down her face. But I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. Maris, I don't want to lose you, Calder. I don't want our family to fall apart. Me, it's already broken, Maris. And I don't know if it can be fixed. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sitting at the table, clutching her mug and sobbing quietly. I spent the rest of the morning pacing around my office, trying to figure out what to do. Divorce? Separation? How do you even start untangling a life that's been so tightly woven together for years? At noon, Sloane came home. She barely said a word to me as she dropped her backpack by the stairs and headed to the kitchen. I followed her, my voice low. Me, Sloane, we need to talk. She didn't turn around, just kept scrolling on her phone. Sloane, about what, Dad? Me, about what's happening. About your mom and me. Sloane, sighing, finally turning to face me, I don't want to talk about it. I already know. Me, you know. She shrugged, her face set in stone. Sloane, I'm not stupid, Dad. I've seen how Mom looks at Alden. I've heard her on the phone. And honestly, I don't even care anymore. That hit harder than I expected. Me, Sloane, this isn't normal. And it's not okay. You shouldn't have to pretend like it is. Sloane, whatever. You and Mom can fight it out. Just leave me out of it. She walked past me, heading upstairs, leaving me standing there feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. That night, Maris knocked softly on the door to the guest room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Maris, can I come in? Me, what do you want, Maris? She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Maris, I've been thinking all day. About everything. About us. And I want to try to fix this. Me, fix this? Maris, you've been having an affair. With someone who's supposed to be family. Do you understand how broken that is? She didn't answer. Just stood there, her arms wrapped around herself. Maris, I'll end it. I'll tell Alden it's over. I'll block him, whatever you want. I can't lose you, Calder. For a split second, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the messages. The way she laughed with him. The way Sloane dismissed me like I was a fool. Me, I don't know if I can believe you, Maris. And even if I did, I don't know if I can forgive you. She nodded slowly, her shoulders trembling. Maris, please, Calder. Just think about it. For Sloane, if not for me. She turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat there in the silence, my head in my hands. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Maris stayed out of the guest room after that night. We moved like strangers in our own home, polite, distant, careful not to cross paths unless absolutely necessary. Sloane barely spoke to me, spending most of her time locked in her room or out with friends. I kept replaying Maris's words in my head. I'll end it. I'll tell Alden it's over. But here's the thing, I didn't believe her. A week passed like that. Tense silences, hollow small talk, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything unraveled so fast. Then yesterday, it happened. I was in my office, trying to work, when Maris's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd gone out for groceries, and Sloane was upstairs. The screen lit up with a notification. Alden, tomorrow. Same place, same time. Can't wait to see you. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I put the phone down. She lied. Again. When Maris came home, I was waiting in the living room. She walked in, juggling grocery bags, her keys, and her phone. She froze when she saw me sitting there. Alden texted you. Her face paled. She set the bags down on the floor, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Maris, Calder. Don't. Just don't. Maris, softly, it's not what you think. Then what is it, Maris? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is. She stared at me, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. She had nothing left to say. I asked you for honesty. I asked you to end it. And instead, you keep sneaking around like I'm some idiot who'll just let this slide. Maris, it's over, Calder. I swear I was going to tell him that. You think I believe that? After everything? After the lies, the excuses, the way you've humiliated me over and over again. She finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she sank into one of the dining chairs, burying her face in her hands. Maris, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't. I hate myself for it, Calder. But I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to fix this. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the texts. The whispers. The laughter. You can't fix this, Maris. You can't undo it. And I can't keep living like this, wondering where you are, who you're with, what lie you'll tell me next. She looked up at me, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Maris, are you leaving me? The words hung in the air between us. I didn't answer right away because, truthfully, I didn't know. I don't know yet. But I can't stay in this house with you right now. Her face crumpled as she let out a sob, but I turned away, walking upstairs to pack a bag. I drove to a hotel that night. Some generic chain place with beige walls and scratchy sheets. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling empty. At some point, Sloane texted me. Sloane, where are you? Mom's crying. What's going on? I couldn't bring myself to reply. What was I supposed to say? Your mother's been having an affair, and I can't look at her without seeing him? The weight of it all crushed me. The marriage, the family, the life I'd built, it felt like it was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. This morning, I woke up in that hotel room, staring at my phone for a long time before finally texting Maris. We need to talk. Today. Just us. No lies this time. She replied almost instantly. Maris, okay. I'll be here. And now, I'm sitting in this parking lot outside our house, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I know there's no coming back from this. Whether we stay together or not, something between us is permanently broken. But I have to go inside. I have to face her. I have to decide if there's anything left to save. Sat in the car for what felt like an hour, staring at the front door. The house, my house, felt unfamiliar now, like crossing the threshold meant stepping into enemy territory. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car and walked up the steps. The door was unlocked, and when I stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Maris was sitting on the couch, a mug of tea clutched between her hands. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked small, vulnerable. Maris, you came back. We said we'd talk. She nodded and set the mug down on the coffee table. Maris, Sloane's not here. She went to Olivia's again. I thought it'd be better this way. I sat down on the armchair across from her, keeping a safe distance. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. So tell me, when did it start? She flinched but didn't look away. Maris, 6 months ago. 6 months. Half a year. Longer than I'd let myself imagine. Why? Maris, whispering, I don't know. I was lonely. I don't know, Calder. He was there, and he made me feel seen. I was here, Maris. I was right here. Maris, no you weren't. You were buried in work, in emails, in whatever you do in your office all day. You were physically here, Calder, but you weren't really with me. Her voice cracked on those last words, but I didn't let them land. Me, so that makes it okay? That makes sleeping with Alden, the guy you knew would rip this family apart, justifiable. Maris, no. Nothing justifies it. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Calder. I know I don't deserve it. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my hands over my face. Me, what happens now, Maris? Do you love him? She froze. Her lips parted slightly, and her hands clenched in her lap. Maris, I don't know. That was it. That was the nail in the coffin. Me, you don't know. Wow. Maris, Calder, I'm being honest. Isn't that what you wanted? The truth. Me, the truth? The truth is that I've been a ghost in my own home while you've been sneaking around with Alden, laughing at me behind my back. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But I felt numb, like the anger had drained out of me, leaving nothing but exhaustion in its place. Me, I can't do this anymore, Maris. She looked up, her eyes wide and desperate. Maris, Calder, please. Me, no. Stop. Whatever we were, whatever we had, it's gone. You made sure of that. I stood up, my voice cracking as I spoke. Me, I'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow. We'll figure out what happens next. But I can't stay here. Not like this. Maris started sobbing harder, clutching her knees as if they were the only things keeping her from falling apart completely. But I didn't stay to comfort her. I walked upstairs, grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed earlier, and headed back down. Maris was still on the couch, her face buried in her hands. At the door, I paused. Me, for what it's worth, I did love you, Maris. I really did. She didn't respond. I stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. I checked into the same hotel as before. The room smelled like stale carpet cleaner, and the hum of the air conditioning filled the silence. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. Sloane had texted earlier. Sloane, are you and Mom okay? Are you coming home? I didn't know how to answer her. I still don't. For now, I'm just sitting here in this beige room, trying to piece together what's left of my life. Tomorrow, I'll call the lawyer. Tomorrow, I'll figure out how to tell Sloane. Tomorrow, I'll start facing the wreckage. But tonight? Tonight, I'm just broken. I woke up in the hotel room to the dull gray light of early morning filtering through thin curtains. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another text from Sloane. Sloane, Dad, are you coming home today? Please answer me. She'd sent it an hour ago. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing a reply. Me, I'll be home later today. We'll talk then, okay? I tossed the phone back onto the bed and sat there, head in my hands. The weight of everything pressed down on me like wet cement. By noon, I was back in the driveway, staring at the house again. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage where I'd been cast as the clueless husband in someone else's tragic drama. When I walked inside, Sloane was waiting in the living room. She was curled up on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes puffy and red. Sloane, Dad, are you leaving us? Her voice cracked on the last word, and it nearly broke me. Me, no, sweetheart. I'm not leaving you. I sat down across from her, leaning forward. Me, your mom and I, we're going through something really hard right now. But no matter what happens, I'm still your dad, and I'll always be here for you. Sloane nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Sloane, I heard you too last night. I heard everything. I closed my eyes briefly. So she knew. At least, some of it. Me, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. You shouldn't have to deal with this. Sloane, is it because of Alden? Did she? She couldn't finish the sentence, and honestly, I was glad she didn't have to. Me, it's complicated. But it's not your fault, Sloane. None of this is your fault. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and nodded again. Sloane, are you getting divorced? Me, I don't know yet. But things are going to change. And whatever happens, I promise you, you'll be okay. We'll be okay. She looked so small sitting there on the couch, clutching a throw pillow like it was a life raft. Sloane, I hate Alden. I hate him so much. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell her not to feel that way because, honestly, I hated him too. Maris came home in the late afternoon. She must have been out running errands because she walked in with a couple of shopping bags. When she saw Sloane and me sitting in the living room, her smile faltered. Maris, you're home. Me, yeah. We need to talk. All of us. Sloane looked between us, then stood up and bolted upstairs, leaving us alone. Maris set the bags down slowly. Maris, did you talk to her? Me, yeah. She knows, Maris. Or at least, she knows enough. Maris closed her eyes briefly, pressing her fingertips to her temples. Maris, I never wanted this. I never wanted any of this to happen. Me, but it did. She looked at me then, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman I'd loved. But it was fleeting, like a shadow slipping through my fingers. Maris, do you really want a divorce, Calder? Her voice was small, trembling. Me, I don't know. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the floor. Maris, I'll give you space. If you want me to leave for a while. Me, no. You're Sloane's mother. This is still your home, too. But things can't stay the same, Maris. They can't. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. That night, Sloane and I ate dinner together at the kitchen island. Maris stayed upstairs. It was quiet, too quiet. Sloane picked at her food, occasionally glancing toward the stairs. Sloane, Dad, are you gonna be okay? I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. Me, yeah, kiddo. I'll be okay. We'll both be okay. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. When Sloane went to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room for a long time, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, and all I could think about was how badly Maris and I had failed her. I walked back to the guest room, closing the door behind me. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed. A text from Maris. Maris, I'm sorry, Calder. For everything. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to try. Please, just tell me if there's any hope left. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. But I couldn't answer her. Not yet. I set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The pieces of our life were scattered all around me, and I didn't know if they could ever be put back together again. Didn't respond to Maris's text. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. The next morning, I heard her moving around the house early, the soft creak of floorboards and the clink of coffee mugs. I stayed in the guest room until Sloane knocked on the door. Sloane, Dad, Mom's leaving for a few days. She wanted me to tell you. I opened the door, and there she was, Sloane, looking so much older than her 16 years, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Me, where's she going? Sloane, she didn't say. Just that she needed space. I nodded, rubbing a hand over my face. Me, okay. Thanks, kiddo. When I walked downstairs, Maris was by the door with a small suitcase. She looked at me, eyes red and tired. Maris, I'm giving you space, Calder. I'll stay with my sister for a while. Me, okay. She hesitated like she wanted to say more, but instead, she just nodded and walked out the door. The sound of it closing felt final. Sloane came downstairs a few minutes later and sat next to me on the couch. Neither of us said anything. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet, truly quiet. But it didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. The days after Maris left blurred together. The house felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of it. Sloane stayed mostly in her room, and I wandered aimlessly between my office and the guest room, trying to keep busy with anything that didn't require me to think too hard. One evening, I found Sloane in the living room, curled up on the couch with her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her expression uncertain. Sloane, do you think she's coming back? I sat down across from her, the weight of her question pressing into my chest. Me, I don't know, Sloane. She hesitated, biting her lip. Sloane, do you want her to come back? I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face, searching for an answer that wouldn't shatter her. Me, I want us to be okay. Whatever happens with your mom, I want you to be okay. That's what matters most to me right now. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. After a moment, she scooted over and leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. Neither of us said anything after that. We just sat there in the quiet, the faint sound of the clock ticking in the background. That night, I lay in the guest room, staring up at the cracks in the ceiling. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Maris, I miss you. I miss us. Please tell me if there's still a chance. I stared at the message, the faint glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. For a long moment, I considered replying, typing something, anything. But what could I say? What words could possibly make sense of all this wreckage? I let the phone fall back onto the nightstand and turned away, pulling the blanket over me. Maybe there's a future where things heal, where trust is rebuilt and wounds scar over. Or maybe there's not. All I know is that, for now, it's just me and Sloane. And that has to be enough.